And so, you know, this further adds complexity to the debate that I know we're having in the U.S. in Congress on how much of the greenhouse gas cost, of the carbon cost, can we pass on to the consumer in a time of recession. So it's just another set of variables that add complexity to the issue, such that things aren't as black and white as many of us at this conference might like, myself included. So I think the last bullet kind of summarizes certainly our view, and that is that we need to be aggressively developing all of these sources of energy, whether it's in the power sector, whether it's in the biofuel sector, whether it's deep water oil and gas, that to meet these growth curves that all the data says we're going to need to continue economic growth in the world, we're going to need all of these sources of energy. Our challenge is how do we keep from letting the short-term pressures, the recession, the fact that in the U.S. we haven't passed binding climate legislation, so how do we keep the development pressure on? How do we keep the R&D funded? How do we finance these projects for the future in a time when the outlook is very cloudy at best? Certainly Mike's clients and a lot of great work is underway. We have many good things going on, as he talked about, from the stimulus program, and actually we're helping a lot of clients write grants to fund projects going forward. So the bottom line is, in the U.S. we're going to need a lot more energy, and biofuels is clearly a big part of that mix. I don't put this up to debate what percentage biofuels will be, except to say that it's going to be a big part of the mix, and many of you in the audience, particularly the advanced biofuels, are a key part of that. Same thing happens in the rest of the world, except the curve is much steeper. The rest of the world looks much tougher when you think about how do we fill the gap in China and India and some of the rapid emerging economies of the world. Brazil clearly is the success story in the world. I've been telling people this for several years as I travel around the world, so I'm not saying this because I'm at the conference. But the combination of vision, of know-how, and the will to develop the distribution network you've seen. From the first time I came to Brazil, I was amazed that at the technology around the flex fuel vehicles, that you can go to a petrol station or a biofuel station and make the decision on what to fill your tank with, at what cost. That infrastructure developed is a sign of that long-term vision that Brazil has. And I think the key question is, for us in the whole industry, is how can we replicate this success in other countries? One of the daunting issues that we face in the biofuels implementation in most parts of the world is this issue of infrastructure. Certainly things like biobutanol and others will make a big difference, but it's very tough to launch a new product when you have to also launch the whole infrastructure to evolve it. And this is one of the key issues around whether it's plug-in hybrids or whether it's hydrogen or compressed natural gas for vehicles, is this issue of the infrastructure required. We can probably do it in the U.S., we can probably do it as you have in Brazil and some other developing countries, but for much of the world it's almost an impossible task. Our company's involved in a whole array of the feedstock sources. I won't go through all those except to say there's lots of ways to make biofuels, and that's one of the key attractions, is almost every country in the world has some sort of feedstock that they can use to produce biofuels. Lots of technology involved. As many of you all know, you're in this business. What we see, though, is a lot of key issues. I know we track about 150 companies, global companies that are in new emerging bioprocess routes, mostly focusing on fuels. The challenge is which of these will be economic. Which of the enzyme developments are going to have the breakthrough, and on which feedstocks. So very challenging task that will take time, but there's really some fabulous success stories out there that we'll be seeing come to market in the next couple of years. So one of the key questions we get everywhere is, can biofuels really make a difference? We've got such a massive installed base of petroleum consuming vehicles. The infrastructure to get gasoline around the world to the right place at the right time has evolved over the last 100 years. So how can we quickly get or most quickly get the biofuels out into the market? I really enjoyed Ian Dobson's speech yesterday from BP, where he talked about biobutanol, one of those potential emerging technologies that will flow through the existing infrastructure. Great option there. All this slide says is that, yeah, it is achievable to make a difference. We can make a difference, just like we can make a difference with CO2 and the greenhouse gases. So which of the technologies will prevail? As CH2M Hill, as Rob Smith, the answer is I don't know. And so therefore, we're kind of like His Excellency Naimi, Minister of Petroleum in Saudi Arabia, who said that every BTU counts and must be developed to meet the energy demand of the future. All energy paths must be developed. That's not to say that we don't have favorites and we don't see one technology looking better now than others. But any of us that tried to predict the future 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, the only guarantee is that we would have been wrong in one way or another. The capital requirements are massive. If you look at Mr. Tanaka's comment there, whether it's biofuels, whether it's oil and gas, to meet the energy demand of the future, we need we need capital investments on the order of $11 trillion in transportation fuels and $13.6 trillion in power. So we're talking about massive amounts of capital, regardless of which solution and technology comes out on top. So in summary, we're going to need all the forms of energy very clearly to meet the demand for the rest of the century. Consolidation and collaboration are really the key to moving forward, and conferences like this are very key to the success to get the right fuel to the consumer at the right place. I didn't talk a lot today about electric cars, about batteries. Clearly, that's part of our future. Our personal view is that some of these technologies we're going to start seeing come in the next 2 years. But if we look the last 20 years, it's a long cycle time for technology to evolve. So it'll take us a long time to displace biofuels and or petroleum from the mix. So we've got to get really good at each of these while we're working on the emerging technologies such as plug-in hybrids and battery-powered cars to be distributed around the world adequately so that we can turn off the oil valve or the biofuel valve. Technology clearly is the key. We're big proponents of technology and spend a lot of our time helping emerging companies define their technology, scope their technology, estimate their technology, and looking at the critical variables that they need to make the step change in economics so that the consumer will buy it. One thing that often gets left out of the policy debates, out of the politicians' rhetoric, is in fact the view of the consumer. And the one thing that if you look back the last 20, 25 years, it's very clear is our ability to predict what the consumer will buy 20 years in advance isn't too good. We've had lots of starts and stops around the world at a whole array of technologies because the consumer was left out of that mix, and the fact that convenience, safety, and many other variables are very important to each of us and to our families as we go forward. So lastly, we know that we're going to see step changes in the biofuels arena. We're seeing them now. We're seeing the prototypes of many of these technologies come out. But clearly the variable that we have to work on is the Brazilian model for allowing biofuels to be used interchangeably with oil and gas. And I think the key question that that we look at is how can we take this successful model from Brazil and take it to other countries. The know-how here is rich. I think there's great opportunity for Brazilian companies in collaboration with others, such as CH2M Hill, to look at how we can greatly accelerate the integration of biofuels into the supply chain in many other parts of the world. So thank you for your time. Energy, water, and the environment clearly all come together to help us build a better planet, and are all this triangle and balance are the things that we have to work on in the future. And together we can make a difference. Thank you.
Bom, eu queria também agradecer a palestra do Rob Smith e A gente agora está aberto às perguntas e, enquanto elas não chegam à mesa, eu gostaria de fazer alguns comentários. Eu acho, como foi muito bem colocado nessa última apresentação, que nos próximos 20 anos o mundo vai crescer, a população vai aumentar e vai haver um crescimento econômico natural. Com isso, todos concordamos que vai precisar de haver uma oferta maior de energia. E isso me leva a afirmar que não podemos abrir mão de nenhuma fonte primária de energia, nem de petróleo, nem de gás, nem de energias renováveis, os biocombustíveis, ou eólica, solar, ou nuclear. Agora, tem dois grandes desafios que a gente vai ter que enfrentar, né, nós no Brasil e no mundo, que é produzir essa quantidade, essa grande quantidade adicional de energia, gerando menos CO2, né, e com isso tem que produzir e consumir também energia nova de maneira mais eficiente, né? A gente é muito pouco eficiente no consumo e na produção de energia. Uma segunda colocação que eu coloco para vocês é que isso também me leva a crer que o petróleo, quer dizer, vai perder importância relativa nas matrizes energéticas mundiais, porque não dá para queimar no século XXI a quantidade de petróleo que nós queimamos no século XX, porque da questão da preocupação das mudanças climáticas. Eu acho que o Brasil tem uma posição privilegiada no que se refere ao setor de energia, porque nós temos imensas reservas hídricas, a gente tem um potencial grande para gerar energia elétrica com vento, eólica, nós com solar também temos uma grande reserva, uma das maiores reservas de urânio do mundo, temos vantagens comparativas, somos quase imbatíveis na produção de biocombustíveis, porque temos terra, temos sol, né, temos água, e agora com o pré-sal a gente passa também a ter uma posição privilegiada enquanto produtor de petróleo e gás natural. Eu acho que o que falta, né, no Brasil e talvez no mundo é que se definam políticas públicas que olhem a nova realidade do mercado de energia, né? E com isso se dê sinais corretos, tanto para os investidores como para os consumidores de energia. E com isso vai se estimular essas mudanças tecnológicas. Me parece que a saída dessa crise passa por grandes mudanças tecnológicas que vão fazer com que essa questão da produção de energia não seja um problema, né, para o crescimento econômico mundial, né, e que a gente consiga suprir energia de maneira sustentável no Brasil e no resto do mundo, de acordo com essa barreira que a gente tem hoje da questão das mudanças climáticas. Então, eu tenho aqui já duas perguntas. A primeira para o professor Aleklett, do Henrique Oliveira, ele é da University of Michigan, que ele fala que o Jeff Rubin, ex-economista-chefe do CBIE, estabelece uma conexão entre os altos preços do petróleo até setembro do ano passado, de 2008, e a atual crise financeira econômica. Ele pergunta se o senhor concorda com essa correlação.
Thank you for the question. I'd like to mention for you that Colin Campbell, that is the co-founder together with me and some other of ASPO, the Association for the Study of Peak Oil, told the world in 2005 that we probably should have a situation as we had today, and that it was the driving price of oil that should start these things. Exactly how it should be, we didn't know at that time, but we was quite sure that there should be a collapse in the global economy. And if you look into it, we have that Europe, for instance, was not hurt so much because the dollar get weaker and weaker, and that means the price for us in euro was not so increasing so much. So we didn't have an inflation in